To some people, society today is divided between youth and the so-called establishment. They believe that we are in two separate worlds, two worlds that find it impossible to communicate. This film is concerned with communicating and understanding. It's an exciting concept in educational involvement. Watch, listen, get involved.
I think it's extremely important to spend time listening to the student today. I think maybe that faculty have talked too much and administrators have talked too much, and now in a sense the student is talking, and it's pretty important to be cognizant of what he's saying. One thing I think that's it's fairly pertinent is to realize that we're not dealing with the same student we used to be dealing with. In other words, things are impinging upon the student today much more sharply, much more severely, much more painfully. And he's caught in a dilemma, and he is confused. And so he says, yeah, I need to sit down with someone, not just once while I'm in college, but continues to ask the major questions. And these major questions are the same questions. Who am I? What am I? Where am I going? But it's interesting. There's a little different focus, as I said. The focus now is not so much on who am I and what am I and where am I going, but he's saying, who are we? Where are we going? And what can we do?
Now that we've gotten through this movement once, I think it's pretty obvious to all of you that this is very romantic music, almost lush music, I think it could be.
The Conservatory of Music is the oldest of the 6 professional schools in the University of Pacific. Founded in 1878, the Conservatory of Music offers a program through the doctorate in music. The other professional schools of dentistry, law, engineering, education, and pharmacy have similar programs which base themselves on professional preparation. The conservatory has for many years offered programs not only in performance but in the areas such as music therapy. Recently, we've experimented in mental retardation. We have a program in theory composition. Many of the students playing the orchestra today are highly trained young composers. The conservatory then would be quite representative of the entire university in that it's rooted very strong in the old and in the tradition, and yet has a very strong thrust forward in an innovative and experimental matter.
In 1947, when I was inaugurated, I chose as the theme of my inaugural talk, Pioneer or Perish. I think that might be the most characteristic phrase of the activities of this institution since its founding, because we not only have served a great interior empire here in California, but we have been able to grow with the state. And as the interior of California is growing the way it is, I think we have demonstrated that the University of the Pacific has grown along with it. We have not only tried to work in the liberal arts area, but we have also taken into our orbit some fine private institutions in Northern California who have needed university affiliation. Notably, these have been the School of Dentistry in San Francisco, now located in a new $9 million structure at the corner of Sacramento and Webster Street.
Now, the thing I want you to notice about the outline form on the cavity preparation is that we normally want to follow out all the deep grooves and fissures and make a nice curvilinear outline form for an amalgam.
We will ultimately build this school up to an enrollment of 419 dental students, and it ought to be, because of its new facility, one of the finer schools of dentistry in America. A second opportunity came to us when we decided to amalgamate the McGeorge School of Law.
How can we tell, or what test could we devise to determine whether a suspect is indigent under the wording of the Miranda warning?
By representation at the time, the person would not be indigent.
With respect to the intent of a person applying for a position of trust, such as a bank teller, if at the time of application he has the intent to steal, is the fraud in applying such a fraud that the resultant crime would be larceny by trick, or can he legitimately obtain a job and then subsequently be guilty of embezzlement?
I think the problem that many of us are having is the seeming dispute between you and Perkins, where he indicates that the crime goes back to the intent that the teller had when he got the job at the bank, intending at that time to defraud the bank.
Many structural changes have occurred since we have been on the Stockton campus, because in a situation of growth, we have got to meet changing needs as they occur. Some things that we adopted in the early days have been eliminated. Other things have been expanded into greater public service. We had for instance, the old College of the Pacific, the name College of the Pacific. It has since grown to where it has become a unit of a larger structure called the University of the Pacific. This became necessary because we had a school of music, a school of education, a school of engineering, a school of pharmacy, a school of dentistry, a graduate school, and then 3 cluster colleges, namely Raymond College, Albert Covell College, our Spanish-speaking college, and Callison College, which is now, you might say, in its 2nd year.
There's an interesting way to explain what a cluster college is. The heart of a cluster college is the kitchen. First, you construct a kitchen which will serve 750 people. And then you construct 3 dining halls. This kitchen then serves 3 dining halls. Each dining hall then has its administrative center, where we're seated right now. And then each administrative center has 3 or 4 dormitories. Now then, you then have 250 students with their own administrative center, their own dormitories. You're on the way to 3 separate, innovative educational programs. And then you build another building which serves all 3 cluster colleges as classrooms for the students and office space for the faculty from the 3 cluster colleges. You then have a cluster, and this cluster truly is built around the kitchen. Now, each cluster college puts emphasis on an individual new type, an effective type of educational program.
All in all, I would say that we would hope ultimately to have at least 15 of these cluster colleges in operation. And rather than let our central core, our liberal arts college, the College Pacific, get too large, we would hope to grow larger by becoming smaller. That is, by establishing these small colleges where students feel as though they really belong to something and have an academic base.
The thing isn't, you know, like just this big, massive, absolute given that you can't fight, you know, and you can't change. It's something that you got to be in contact, and you got to be able to put some emotion. You got to be able to connect yourself with some emotion to these things. And it seems like education puts you in these really, really big cerebral clouds.
You're confronted by things that are solid and concrete and must be manipulated, and you have to know what your visceral reactions to those things are going to be.
You got to have a gut reaction to things, you know. And if you don't, you're going to have gut reactions to stupid things, and you're not going to know where your emotions are taking you, and they're going to take you anyway.
Now, when he talks like this, you've got to listen. He's ready to point out the contradictions in terms of what you say and what you do.
You have to build in a kind of morality, a morality that thinks.
You're saying...
Not necessarily any type of morality that says you have to think this or you have to think that, but that you have to think about everything and all of its consequences.
And just because, you know, you have the ability to relate to people as other than objects, just the way you relate to a book as other than an object, then that's your problem.
He's saying, look, we're all in the boat together. That's why the emphasis on we.
And here we are with all this time, and we're thinking like mad about all these problems, and we've got the world licked, except that when we get out, people just run over you. I'm completely paranoid about leaving school because I have all these ideas, and when I get out there, I'm not going to be able to use them. Because people just come by and run over you, you know, like pollution. Why do we have pollution problems? Why do we have people not using birth control pills when they need to? Why do we have slums? Why do we have ghettos? Why do we have everything else? You know, with all these problems because no one has stopped to think about what will happen if you keep dumping chemicals into Lake Michigan. Or what will happen if you don't worry about people who live on the other side of town.
You know, reactions like, boy, this is really bad. We really should have more minority students in the University of Pacific. Yeah, it just shows the idiocy of the administration. And a lot of people will think that, you know. All right, good to think that. You realize it. But does it go beyond that? No, because that's the whole thing. Once you've thought it, then that's all that needs to be done, you know. It's as if thinking is acting, and it's not.
And he's asking about what's the basis of our judgment in government? What's the moral, the ethical? What's the personal and the national morality? And all in a sense for the purpose of understanding what it is to be a human being in a society that is in a state of dilemma, in a world that's in a state of dilemma. And thank goodness the young student still feels some hope. And the hope is in what we can do together. Now, we say, where does this dialogue, this conversation on values take place today? Within the academic program. Well, previously we say, well, that's the subject area of religion or philosophy. And what did we do? We took a program and we said, all right, we will require of a student that he take a course in religion, or we require that he take a course in philosophy. But the questions are being asked today, everybody suddenly realized this is not the sole property of the people in religion, or the sole property of the people in philosophy. This is everyone's question. Now, the chemist ought to be as much concerned about the answers to these questions as anyone else. The biologist, the physicist, the psychologist, the sociologist. These are important, we say, liberal arts questions. These are the liberal arts questions. I'm not saying that the student has answers or we provide him answers to this. This is a search that he has and we search together on. I mean, the academic situation is an arena of ideas, an arena of positions, and you don't superimpose any one on the student. Now, let me illustrate. We have at the University of the Pacific a school, a college, Raymond College. And most of its program is devoted to this value dialogue.
You probably all know that for many years alcohol was never served in the White House. In fact, I think only after repeal that it began to be formed to serve again as a part of White House social life. And I wonder if the attitude toward marijuana or other non-addictive drugs might undergo the same sort of change in a few generations or a few years, so that the question arises whether or not, instead of champagne, we could have pot parties at the White House.
But are we talking about drugs as a whole, or are we talking about marijuana? Because, I mean, when we deal with just marijuana, it's completely different, because marijuana doesn't have all the hang-ups that other drugs do.
I think we should be dealing just strictly with marijuana then, because that's what we talked about, marijuana parties in the hothouse.
It's the problem of, since dope, I mean anything, marijuana or especially your high ones, do control the chemical structure of the body to some degree or another. They alter the chemical structure of the mind to give you this kind of a trip. To what degree will that pass the person's ability, his rational judgment, to control it? And then what do we do to step in when people do lose control over themselves or their ability to handle this thing?
I would question that. I would hope that the present establishment or whatever could take hold of this issue, because as I said previously, there are a lot of people who are confused about the use of drugs. So by the time, let's say, we came into a position, we could be, really blowing it. Usage of drugs on campus, and this holds true in any institution. The federal government, Washington, D.C., I imagine the president and, or even Finch, HEW, is not fully aware of the problem and how to relate to it. And they are establishing standards for change that seem to be wrong, because they're not. Well, the problem is that they're not aware of the confusion surrounding drugs.
And this is in the happening now. There is education, and then there is a lot of books being written and television programs and everything. And this no longer is an issue. The issue is whether it's going to be decided on an individual moral basis to use or not to use drugs.
We saw an advertisement on TV the other night showing the perils of marijuana. It was absolutely insane. I mean, as to what it is supposed to do to you.
As well as the lower classes who don't know any better, and they're amoral. So therefore, we've judged by our standards that,
For instance, that attorney in Mill Valley who was taking affidavits was getting letters from professional people who had been using marijuana for 15 to 20 years and hadn't raped children or, pillaged and burned like marijuana is supposedly causing you to do.
Raymond College specifically, which I'm responsible for, having been in existence the longest of the three cluster colleges at the university, has undergone a large variety of problems, some of which it has solved in a variety of interesting ways. And these, I think, have illustrated to us the best way in which the cluster college system can work in a larger setting.
Well, I've never even have heard of the term around here, which is very interesting. But I think it's it's a natural thing, dialogue, and it happens, it happens everywhere. And I think the reason it succeeds so well at Raymond is because it is a smaller community, and there is a lot of interaction between the professors and the students, etc.
I think while value dialogue takes on a different connotation for me, because I, too, am a College of the Pacific student living in the Raymond Quad. So I really enjoy more or less the social life of the Raymond community while I attend the academic life over in the other side of the campus.
I want to go into literary editing, and I want to be the kind of adult who knows everything. Cultured. I'm success-oriented.
You mean from a monetary point of view?
No, not from a monetary point of view, but from what my main goal in life is to achieve something that I'm satisfied with in myself.
There's a intellectual and emotional discussion of change in our lives, and they're intertwined.
Individually, you really wouldn't have to have the value dialogue so much, because you can
the worst paranoid and the biggest egotist can understand himself, and he's perfectly willing to act on what he wants to do. Many of my viewpoints aren't like a lot of other kids. There is some similarity in some of the viewpoints, and it's one of those things that even with my viewpoints, you know, I support Ronald Reagan, and this is something that you don't do on a lot of college campuses and things like this, and yet there's quite a bit of respect for the arguments that I propose, the reasons why I do this. And people will cooperate, they'll understand, and you're surprised at some of the times the influence you can exert. People are willing to listen to your arguments. You in turn have to listen to theirs, and you have to accept quite a bit. And you're going to find out you're wrong in some cases and they're right, but there's a good give and take, and it's really valuable.
Well, some people say, oh, this is general education. Some say this is interdisciplinary study. But this is the case where you have men in each academic discipline, historian, the psychologist, the sociologist, the philosopher, all in all of their courses, focusing in and out on these questions. These important questions that help an individual to know where he stands and what's the basis of his decision. Now, the student is interested in the questions of value, particularly in defining himself. And as I said before, he's become concerned about the national ethic, the international ethic. So he says, we want to study more about other cultures. And we don't want just to study about them, we want the contact with the people. Covell College is a wonderful example. A college that's devoted to an understanding of the relationships between Latin America and the United States.
Our concept of Latin America is stilted because we only study Latin America as one group, when it's really not that at all. It's a series of different nations that are very separate and very different from each other. So we are learning about, not about ourselves, but we are learning about 17 or 18 different groups of them, and they are learning about each other at the same time too.
Actually, the only two countries that I was familiar with was Venezuela and Ecuador. That's because, I'm not too far away from the border, from these two countries. But I wasn't familiar at all with Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and so. And now I'm learning here about, my friends from Latin America. Learning a little bit from them, mostly from all of them, way of speaking.
I think the main point is that the Latin American family is a family. The family ties between grandfather, father, son, daughter, and they all live together. They maintain a tighter relationship, emotionally, responsibility-wise, and financially, much more so than the North American has grown accustomed to, being accustomed to. And I don't know where it's come from, how it's gotten started, or I shouldn't say how they gotten started, how we've lost it. I should say, I don't know how we've lost it, but we have.
In this college, everything is taught in the Spanish language. Now, by everything, I mean not the literature. I mean everything from algebra through zoology.
A la potencia de menos un tercio es igual a ¿qué?
Es igual a 1 sobre A la 1 tercio.
Correcto.
Los mercantilistas fundamentalmente se preocupaban de vender, exportar y recibir oro. O sea, el enriquecimiento sin tener en cuenta absolutamente para nada los intereses de los demás países.
Pero contrastado con este grupo tenemos lo que se llama los conservadores ilustrados.
Desgraciadamente para McCarthy, él decidió a seguir con su política de McCarthyism y trató de formular otro caso en contra del ejército.
Half of our students are North Americans, the other half are Latin Americans. The purpose of this college, the objective of this college, is to produce what is called an inter-American specialist. And the inter-American specialist is a man or woman who can function in any one of the Spanish-speaking Americas or the English-speaking Americas. This inter-American specialist, for example, is a man who has a major in one of the critical needs of the Americas. It may be bilingual bicultural education. It may be foreign trade, economic development. It may be foreign service, which would include public service, public administration, or it may be finally, community development. Every student then has his specialty. Every student eventually becomes bilingual.
Callison is a four-year liberal arts college. It's the university's fourth college, and it has a specialization on non-Western studies. As a part of the requirement for any student regularly enrolled, he has to spend his second year living and studying in Bangalore, India. There are many purposes other than intellectual for the year in India. We think that any student who lives for this period of in-depth exposure to another culture will be forced to examine his own value system in a way that would never take place if he were on this campus. We also think it will force him to take a long, hard look at the values of his country and Western culture as he evolves his own value stance and as he also evolves vocational choices.
We have programs in Zambia, in England, in Germany, in Israel, in Madras, India, in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Mexico, in Jamaica, in Yugoslavia. Now, suppose we have 50, 75, 100 more students participating just for a short period of time, immersed in the culture. They're studying intensively the culture, contact with the people. They come back, and before you know it, in most any conversation that takes place on campus, there's the element of the international introduced. This changes the climate of the situation. All right.
This is my baby. Where'd you get it? This is my baby. Where did you get her? I found him in the dwarf forest. I'm the wizard of the dwarf forest. I found him when the dwarf died of the terrible sickness.
All right, Joni, you've been listening and you're going to react.
Yes, right.
What's the name of the city?
Columbus.
Columbus, Ohio? Really?
Wow. Could they use it to run machines?
I guess.
They used to use it for boats, to make boats go, for windmills. See, they still use it for windmills.
It's two people.
Right. And that was made 6,000 years ago. Somebody drew those two people.
Really? God, that's good. This thing 6,000 years ago, and they didn't even know nothing.
There is also an involvement in the activities of the community. I think we concentrated on this last year, and we had almost 400 who were working in some agency in the city. They were either the character building agencies, there were students who were doing tutoring in some of the less advantaged areas, students who were doing playground work, students who were working in the social, in the areas of great social need. If you have 400 of these students working in these areas, then they are getting a sense of what the community is like and what it means to be involved in the community.
First and third. Right. Number 7, Larry. Read the directions for me.
Write the 3 new OR words with the vowel sound you hear in 4.
I can call on you. Con tu mano, Francisco. Con tu mano. Flip.
Apple.
Yes, yes, flip.
Apple. Apple.
Uno. No más one. Cuando se dice one, apple. 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 Cuando tenemos más, apples.
Apples.
Sí. Bien.
Which vowel is long? Okay. In other words, he's doing the talking, is that right? Okay, Tommy, this word here. Wheat. Which vowel is doing the talking? The E. Okay.
We're going to try to give you the most recent information that we have acquired, and we aren't going to make any moral judgment. You as young adults are quite capable of doing this when you have all the facts presented. We hope that you have a lot of questions, and we hope that we can answer them. If we can't, we'll sure find out for you. because there's a lot still unknown. So this time I just, the way we start this out is ask if there's any question, anybody has any thing they want to know in particular.
Now, this can be an exciting, dynamic kind of thing. Students in and out of the community. He's bringing his experiences back in terms of the climate of the institution. This affects the climate of the institution. It's alive, it's relevant, it's meaningful, and what they're studying in the classroom becomes related, becomes more meaningful. Not that you take chemistry and teach chemistry in a different way, but the people studying chemistry, you see, have other concerns on their mind, have other kinds of experience that are going to affect them as chemists pursuing a profession wherever they are. And that's what's important.
And then a very important one has been the matter of placing students on practically all of the important committees of the university. I would say that students not only carry on their own student government, but we have tried to place them on the student committees, on the committees of the university that are in a real governance position. For instance, there are students on the graduate council, there are students on the curriculum committee, there are students on the campus safety committee, there are students on the student affairs committee.
That science departments be allowed as an alternative to the present 6 introductory courses proposed by the Danforth Committee. 2, propose a program of 4 to 6 courses in the junior and senior years that would be designed to meet the general objectives of the committee.
I won't buy just their taking their present courses, hooking them up in an inflexible series, and saying that this is the only possible way to teach physics.
The question was whether or not this involved, as what I have seen seems to indicate, and the reason for it is the cut down in the number of courses that they are allowed to teach, in a sense, because of the reduced course load, of whether or not they aren't pulling out of the freshman year program and instead substituting this, that is, in a sense, concentrating completely on their major.
Yes, and I think this is exactly
and I think that's what it looks like. And I say no.
May I comment?
It's in addition to.
My major is sociology, and I'm involved in my particular department discussing overall curriculum in that area.
I was very interested the other day to get a compilation from some of our deans as to why they thought we had relative peace and quiet on the campus as far as demonstrations are concerned. We have not had one major disturbance. And some of the things that seem to contribute to this are the fact that we maintain an open campus.
This is why we brought to campus a series of speakers from all points of view and controversial points of view, and why we placed them in chapel, speaking here in the midst of all this filtered lucidity. At the very foot of the cross, as a matter of fact. Men like John Howard Griffin, the author of Black Like Me, like Bishop James Pike, talking about the new morality in swaddling clothes, the birth of a new kind of way of seeing ourselves. Men like Timothy Leary.
My sermon tonight is the hedonic revolution. Well, there is an incredibly extensive invisible network or brotherhood or sisterhood of people who are involved in the hedonic revolution. Right now, we have available to anyone a repertoire such that there's absolutely no excuse for anyone to feel bad 1 minute of their life.
I am very partial to the power or the authority of young people to endeavor to persuade others for anything. That's the essence of our country. I don't care if you want to persuade us all to be anarchists. That's your privilege in this country, and I hope it may never change. But in order to persuade us, there has to be some rules of the game, and I refuse to be coerced. So I disapprove of the violence manifestations unless there has really been a denial of freedom to speak.
I don't think that's so much of a worry as like curbing the expansion of the military-industrial complex in the Pentagon. Like, there's $100 billion a year that we're spending on destruction of the ecology through the Pentagon, and that $100 billion is needed to restore the planetary tender-sensitive skin.
If you have debates going on in a college, they ought to debate here. If you have celebrations of new sensitivities among the students, that ought to happen here. New music, it ought to happen here. This, to me, is the profound legacy of the Christian faith, that it can risk this kind of freedom, and that it is by definition open and unafraid. The kind of openness, the kind of freedom, the kind of participation, the kind of concerns which we hope are raised in the context of chapel are those concerns which will redeem our world, which will help us in making our students human and humanizing our society once again.
We have these all-university study days. The first one dealt with the Vietnam issue, the second one with the draft. I think there is a school spirit, for whatever we might define that these days, and through that school spirit we have what is known as evolution, not revolution. The administration also participates and encourages. I've told our administrators that instead of being aloof from students, what they ought to do is to take that extra time to go to student rallies or to go to meetings of the University Student Senate, to make themselves known and felt in these student groups.
The athletic department at the University of the Pacific has had a long tradition of outstanding performances, dating back into the 40s under the leadership of Mr. Amos Alonzo Stagg, who is well known as the grand old daddy of American football. Pacific rose to great heights on a national level. It has as its alums in football such people as Eddie LeBaron, Dick Bass, and at one time Pacific had more outstanding football players in professional football than any other school in the nation except for Notre Dame. Tied in with this illustrious background in football, Pacific has developed in the past few years an outstanding basketball program, which in itself has developed into a national representation. In addition to football and basketball, Pacific has 8 other sports on an intercollegiate level.
All right, 2 left now. Come on, you got to try and score him, Robbie. Let's go. Got to go through. Got to get down. Got to get
The
down.
University of the Pacific has been desirous of bringing about a balanced program in athletics. I suppose this could be classified into 3 areas. The first, an academic program, where there are a great many young people who expect to go into athletics professionally, either teaching in physical education or actually playing in professional athletic teams. We serve this group. One of the good things that has happened here has been this increasing emphasis on independent study. As you know, about 95% of the structure of the modern college has been outdated because of the rapid development here in our technological society. Most colleges are doing the things they do in the same old way. Teachers are presenting their material in the same old way. Sometimes it is slightly changed, it is warmed over. Students are listening to lectures and throwing that material back to the professors through examinations. Now, obviously, this has got to be changed, and perhaps part of the disaffection of students toward their institutions in recent months has been caused by this sort of a situation.
After all, what's a mature scholar? A mature scholar is an individual who can take a problem and he knows what to do and he knows how to go at it and he goes at it, you see, and he comes up with something. And he says, that's mine, you see, that's mine. So in a sense, he's saying, you know, I want at least a chance for an aha experience. By aha experience is when a student really digs into something that's his own, something that's been defined for himself, something that has the approval of the professor. And then when he finishes it, he says, aha, you know, that's mine. I did that, you see. So we have to, and we are in the university, expanding not our offerings, not our courses, but our scope to allow the flexibility for the student who wants it to have this kind of opportunity. And so we're moving in introducing more and more opportunity for independent study. You got an idea, if it sounds good, go with it. And we'll judge you. We'll judge you honestly. We'll judge you fairly on what you've done.
Now, you've had an opportunity to check out a couple of other universities other than the University of Pacific, and how do you rate it?
I think this is a real good school. It's not too big. It's not too small. It seems like I've talked to some of the guys, and they said that at first, when they're freshmen, they first come in, it seems like they kind of miss the school spirit and all that they kind of expected, like at a big school. But after they're here for a while, they kind of learn what it's all about, and they get a lot of friends and stuff. They feel kind of close to everybody around, you know, and they make a lot of friends.
I want to be a teacher, and I want to teach Mexican-American children down south because they don't have teachers down there, Spanish teachers down there, and they need people to go down. And this way I would really learn about the culture, and I'd learn the language, and that I'd be using it all the time, or most of the time anyway.
Well, Raymond College is my impression, is really high scholastic. I couldn't tell much about COP. I think it's more like just whatever level you're at, that's what you're at. But Raymond, they seem more, it's really independent, you know. Those kids really, they know what they're doing, they don't have a major or anything, but they just want to get a lot out of everything.
So when you have this kind of a total involvement, and it is possible in an institution of this size, then I think we have students who feel they belong and students who feel that they are not alienated from society and from their own college community in general. Now, if we can do this in college, it becomes a sort of a living laboratory. And if they can also have the involvement in the community, together these two things can move them out into their society as they become citizens and can make them much more effective than they normally would be.
Well, these are some of the elements that go into making a program that is vital to today, a dynamic program, a program which students may feel a little bit more at home with. The value dialogue that goes on, the international dimension to the educational program, the community involvement, the flexibility through independent study and the like. I think the upshot of the whole thing is that the university, whether it likes it or not, is fast becoming the custodian of the mind and spirit of society. This is where the vital part of the population is gathered. This is where the ideas are being examined, explored, debated. And now we're dealing with a population of students that represents power. Don't think for a minute that students aren't power today. They are power, they know they're power. And it isn't that there are power against this force or that force. I really believe that their strong desire is basically that all elements, administration, faculty, and students, will work together to redefine the university, its role in society.
It seems to me that the broad definition, as I see it, of an educational institution would be that it is a professional organization. It is staffed by professional people, and it is expected to get professional results. If it follows this procedure, then it is going to be making a great contribution to the young people who choose to come to it, and likewise they will in turn make a great contribution to society.